Excellent. Well, it's great having everyone here this morning. We're starting this new sermon series called Await. It's kind of the daily gifts from a loving Father is kind of the tagline we have on this one. And it's kind of like a big grand Advent calendar, right? It's kind of this idea of us waiting for Christmas. And we're looking at the book of Isaiah in this one. And the book of Isaiah is kind of interesting. We're not kind of going through the whole book. We're kind of picking things out because very much the book of Isaiah is kind of a picture of what's coming forward. He's one of the prophets, right? And looking at what's coming forward, the coming Messiah, kind of coming through all that. But Isaiah has a lot of darkness in it. And sometimes it feels like when we're waiting on things that we have to face some darkness in our own lives. So we'll be looking at through some of those, but Isaiah does something very interesting. He always is, even in the midst of darkness, is pointing us to light. Is pointing us like, hey, hope is coming. Hope is around the bend. Hope is coming. So we will be looking at those as we go through this sermon series. And it hopefully, it'll be good. We'll find out, though. We'll find out. So, Thanksgiving. Everyone had a great Thanksgiving, right? I was at Kevin's house. I don't know, guys, why you guys are laughing. That's mean. Like that, but it's no. We had a great time. It was a great time over there with his whole family and all of that. But Thanksgiving's fun. I have a lot of loaded, complicated emotions around Thanksgiving because the way my family grew up and what we did through Thanksgiving is my grandparents would come either at we would alternate which homes we would go to, but they would either come to ours for Thanksgiving or we'd go to theirs for Thanksgiving, and then we'd go to Christmas on the next one. And whenever the grandparents would show up, it was like just streams of unending joy, right? Especially for like a fourth grade boy, right? Like over there, like my grandmother would come and just pack the freezer filled with freshly baked cookies, right? She froze everything, right? It just immediately went in there. In fact, like cookies, as far as I could see, whenever I was at their house, all I did is drink chocolate milk. It's just a constant stream of chocolate milk like this. That's what I drank. And with the Hershey's syrup inside of it, like unbelievable, right? Like I drank so much chocolate milk there. I attribute it to my dairy issues now. That's oversharing, but that's what was going on there. And I have so much nostalgia for that flavor of Hershey's syrup inside chocolate, inside of milk. I don't even have it in the house. It's such a nostalgia bomb for me. There's other reasons why I don't have it in the house. We talked about that a second ago, but that's such a nostalgia bomb of taste that it's unreal. Because see, these grandparents, I went and visited them once a year by myself for at least a week since I was 5. Right? Like I was close to these people, like over there. And so whenever they came in, it was just joyous jubilation, right? Like this running around and all the games and playing and everything is great. But there was always some hurt to that trip, right? It was today. Today is always the day of hurt on that trip because kids, all the kids just fleed because Coley just stole them all from us, right? She went and took the kids into the other room. But all the kids, like when you're a kid, all of a sudden you wake up Monday morning, the grandparents have vanished. It's like the Lord has taken them, right? They are gone, and then you're forced to wake up early. Mom is throwing toothbrushes into your mouths, and you have to get onto the stinky, smelly, cold bus, and you have to go into school, right? And it's just, and you're like, oh no, just a whole solid week of jubilation and just free living, and then back to the captivity once again of school. Like that's over there. But my grandparents always did something for us on Thanksgiving, my sister and I, which I didn't appreciate it as much back then, but I appreciate it much more now. They would give us a gift. They'd give us a gift. And this is one of them right here. Look at that. It's a little ornament. It's a little ornament. They'd always give us this ornament that we'd open up on Thanksgiving, and we would have it. It says on his butt here, it says Chris 2002, right? So this is. I wasn't quite a child then. I was was 20. I was 20 years old that Christmas. And so quick math there, And but they would always give me that. And this ornament, meant that Christmas was coming. That no matter what hurt may go through, that Christmas was coming. But when the grandparents were here, it was this time of jubilation. It was this time flowing with milk and honey, right? We're going through Isaiah chapter 35, 36, and 37, and 38 and 39, but don't let that slow you down. We're going through this whole section, and I'd like you to read that on your own time. We're not going to go through all that today because it'd make the sermon at least 10 minutes longer than what we're doing now. And so we lost my slides. Here we go. So 35, but listen to 35, and it sounds kind of like when my grandparents came to town, right? It says, then the eyes of the blind will be open and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer and the mute tongue shout for joy. Waters will gush forth in the wilderness and the streams in the desert. Just freezers full of cookies and chocolate milk as far as the eyes can see, right? And those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Well, Zion is like the holy city of God is what Zion means. And joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. It's just unending joy. But something I've been saying around here lately is, like, if things aren't going so hot for you right now, hang on, it's going to pass. If things are going well for you right now, hang on, it's going to pass, right? Like that's kind of what happens here. They're seeing, because there's this undertone in the prophet Isaiah of the exile. The exile. The exile is this time that is coming, that comes in Isaiah, and Isaiah is kind of always talking to it. That's kind of the dark time that's marked there. And there's all these things that keep foreshadowing the exile. And the exile was a time when Babylon came and took over the people of Israel, took them away from their homelands and put them in Babylon, tried to make Babylonian citizens out of them. And that's a dark cloud that kind of hangs over this. And Isaiah's like, listen, the good times are coming. We are waiting for those. But as they wait, there are issues. This right here is the good king Hezekiah. Now, I always think it's funny that even though this guy is like 1,000 years before Jesus, he has a strong resemblance in both look and clothes to like a medieval king, does he not? I think that's odd how that works out. Maybe it has something to do with the artist. I don't know. But King Hezekiah was good king, and he was ruling and reigning, but there was a problem. Assyria was around. And Assyria was going through, and they were systematically taking out all the other nations around God's people there. They were taking all of them out and conquering them and all that. And Hezekiah's like, oh my goodness, I'm getting nervous, right? So he got so nervous that he actually set up an alliance with Egypt. Now, if you've listened to any amount of my sermons, you should have alarm bells going off right away, because according to the Old Testament and the story that got us to this point, do not go back to Egypt. You were enslaved there. There's nothing good for you there. Don't go back to there. So that sends warning lines already in our heads like, ooh, what are they doing? They're getting alliances with Egypt. Don't do that. Don't do that. And so he gets an alliance with Egypt, but he's scared, and the fear just keeps compounding, because this one guy, he's kind of like just like a messenger from Assyria. He comes waltzing into Jerusalem one day. He comes in and he puts a stool down right in the middle of the square in Jerusalem. There's no squares, but you know what I'm talking about. The stool down there, stands on that, and he begins to talk. This is chapter 36 in Isaiah, and it's all just threats. Let's read some of that here. He looks at them, he goes, come now, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. That guy's name is Sennacherib, by the way. We'll talk more about him later. Come and make bargains with him. I will give you 2,000 horses if you can put riders on them, like that he kind of does, right? He's basically saying, I'm going to give you so much wealth, there'll be so many cookies you could never eat them in a lifetime, right? You have so much grandparent time that you don't know what to do with yourselves. Come, join us, right? Like, do you think this guy's telling the truth? Do you think he maybe told this same story to all these other nations? Yeah, right? Like over there. So more threats. We'll skip down a little bit here. More threats. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah, their king, deceive you. He cannot deliver you. He's a terrible king. Don't listen to him. Let's see him throw shade at Hezekiah even more. Do not let Hezekiah mislead you when he says, the Lord will deliver us. Listen to me. Have the gods of any of these other nations delivered their lands from the hand of King Assyria? No. What makes you think that your God will be able to deliver you? See that? See that? Ooh, like that's, so things, you're already seeing that Assyria is taking over all these other things, and now they are targeting you. And this whole chapter 36, what is it designed to do? It's designed to instill fear in you, right? It's like your only hope is in this king of Assyria, right? And you know that Assyria, the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, that he's talking a big game, right? He's talking huge games. He's like, listen, only I can save you. Only I. Everyone else is weak and feckless and terrible. Only I can do this. You need to just, they're all terrible. I am going to be the only one that can save you, right? These are still messages that we hear today. When we look out over the world and see the things, there'll be leaders that pop up and they'll go, I'm the only one. You just need to listen to me. You want so much wealth in your life? Then just follow me, right? Those people over there, they don't know what they're talking about. They're terrible, right? Like that's these people come in our lives and it's like Sennacherib, king of Assyria. But it's not just in political matters, but it's also in when our health begins to fade. And we're like, oh man, I don't know. I don't know. Or it's with our own self-esteem that we've just been beat down and beat down and beat down. And we begin to believe the voices that are in our heads that are saying, oh, I'm worthless, right? I'm not worth anything here. I am awful. And King Hezekiah, here rocking his nice 15th century garb, but he freaks out at this. He's like, oh no, we're next. We're going to get taken over. That thing with Egypt was awful. I shouldn't have done it. And he ends up running to the temple of God Yahweh, his own God. He runs to the temple, and then he does something which I always think is weird in the scriptures. He rips his shirt, right? He rends his garments, he says. He does like a Hulk Hogan on his shirt and just opens it wide. Now, I never do that. Like maybe I've lived a privileged life and have never felt the need to just rip my clothes. Perhaps you guys live a different life than me. And like Old Navy is very happy to have you as a customer or something like that. Although Old Navy stuff just kind of does it on its own. Never mind. We won't get into that. So he rends his clothes in the temple, like he's so angry at all these things and scared, and he ends up saying this prayer. This is chapter 37. And this is part of the prayer. He goes, Lord Almighty God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to all the words of Sennacherib. It has sent to ridicule the living God. Like he's reminding God of who he is. Like it's like, you are amazing and all that stuff. Please don't forget us. Please don't forget us. And is it true, Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste to all the peoples in their lands? They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them. But we know that they weren't gods, but only idols of wood and stone fashioned by human hands. They were nothing, right? Now, Lord, our God, deliver us from this hand so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, Lord, are the only God. You can see he's like reminding God, it's like, remember your promise to us that you would take care of us. Like he's worried that this is all going to just collapse all around them. But here's the thing. God has given these people a gift already. He's given them a gift of knowing who they are as the people of God. If you remember, they practiced circumcision back then, right? And the whole idea behind circumcision was that it was to mark you, kind of like how we brand cattle, kind of like that. It was to mark you as a child of God, right? That there was a physical mark that said that literally, if you were ever feeling awful, you could literally look down and know, I am God's. What are you laughing at? I'm not saying jokes. But you knew that you were God by that, and that he would never leave you or forsake you no matter what. And we see that ends up kind of coming true here. It's a very interesting story. Now, here's a photograph that we have of Sennacherib at the time. And Sennacherib, he had gone back to his hometown, and he was kind of resting of all of his pillaging and all this conquest of all these other nations. And he went in to worship his own God in his God's temple. He went in there, and he was praising his God, saying how amazing he was, and all of these things. And then Sennacherib's own son came out while he was praying to his God in his temple and stabbed his dad in the back, literally. Stabbed his dad in the back. Think about the message that sends right there. Think about it. That as powerful as the God of Assyria was, he had no power to be able to protect his king even in his own temple, right? Remember when Sennacherib, when Hezekiah prayed, God, may you do something that shows the entire world that you have this, right? That you have this. And God showed his way, and he protected them, and he showed them that he had them even through, because they were his people. But there's a problem of Isaiah, is that the exile still happens. That this time of hurt still happens. Yeah, God showed himself evident mightily in that time, but the exile still ends up happening. This is just a quick aside, but my reasoning of why I think the exile happened, why God let them be captured by Babylon, is that they were trying to be Babylon themselves. God's people were trying to be powerful and big and great and all these things, that God wanted them to be humble servants, to always show his will and grace in the world, to care about the least of these. And yet they wanted to be, the biggest one at the playground, right? And God says, well, if you want to be like that, if you want to be Babylon so much, if you want to be just like them, here you can just be them. And he lets them overtake as they go in. And we'll talk more about that later. But it can feel like that in our own lives, right? That we can see these victories of God in our lives, but overall the story just feels looming. That's like, oh man, I don't know how I'm going to face all of this in the future. And when we face that, we have to remember that God gives us gifts as we wait for Christmas to come, as we wait for the Messiah to come, as we wait for all this. He gives us gifts. And I think the gift he gives to the church is very similar to circumcision. We call it baptism. We just celebrated baptism on Friday, which was exciting. We did Axel's baptism. What was that, 3 weeks ago now, something like that? 3-4 weeks ago. So we've had a bunch of baptisms here lately. We did 2 weeks ago. This is last week. We did lots of baptisms here lately. And the exciting thing about that, what baptism is, it's a lot like circumcision, that it's something that happens to you. It's something that the church does, that God works through the church to accomplish in your life. It's almost like a mark, a branding, something physically happening to you that says that you are God's, no matter what. No matter what happens in your life, no matter what tyranny you face, no matter what insecurities you may go in your life, no matter what happens in your health, no matter even how you are feeling about God right now, that God still loves you. And he's with you. I grew up with all these lessons about Christianity that was like, oh, you got to believe the right things about God or you're going to make Jesus cry, right? And that really makes you nervous, right? It makes you nervous because you're like, am I believing just the right things? I don't want to make Jesus cry. But what baptism shows us is that even when we're believing the wrong things, even when we don't have belief, God's still holding us and protecting us. Even when the children of Israel were lost in the midst of Babylon in the exile, God was still seeing them through, giving them gifts as they await Christmas, as they wait Christmas coming. So yeah, as a small boy, I remember the tyranny of the 4th grade, right? And of the bus and all of that. And my grandparents had left. I'm like, when's Christmas going to come? And I could always come home and I could look at these ornaments. You look at the ornaments and know that Christmas was coming. And I have to be honest with you, these ornaments mean more to me now than they ever did when I was a little child. Because they're all dated, right? I think I already said this one's from 2002. I got a bunch of them on that tree right now. But I have 37 years of these. I'm not 37 years old. I'm 39. But the reason why there's a gap in those is because my grandparents died a few years back. And there's a gap, but I know that as I put these ornaments on the tree each year, I know that gap, what that gap represents. I know that I can look at each one of these and I can be filled with love, knowing that this ornament is just a foretaste of the fun and feast to come, and that we will see each other again. And that's the idea that's coming across in Isaiah. And I think that's good news as God gives us gifts as we wait for Christmas. Let's end right there. Jesus, we thank you that you love us so much and that you are around, that you are near to us. Lord, as we face all manner of hurt and pain in our lives, Lord, help us to grab a hold of your gifts, especially our baptisms, to know that we are never alone and that you are always with us and that we are waiting for you to come soon. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.